This is Mike at GameFromScratch, and today we're going to be looking at a program called iDraw. You may recall it from our raster and vector art programs write-up we did a few weeks back. Basically, it's a vector drawing program available on the iPad and Mac OS. It costs about $10 on the iPad and about 25 or 30 on Mac, at least last I checked. If you've never used vector graphics before, it can be a little bit different. Basically, you're drawing in shapes and primitives. We're going to look at that today. So if you're completely new to vector graphics, this should be a great introduction for you. If you are familiar with vector graphics but have no idea how iDraw works, hopefully this should be useful to you as well. We're actually going to follow along an existing tutorial. I'm not going to teach you how to do vector graphics. Number one, I'm a lousy teacher for the subject. I'm barely competent myself. Number two, there's somebody out there who's already done a much better job. And that is, if you are unaware of it, this site, 2D Game Art for Programmers. It's a series of Inkscape tutorials. Inkscape is a free program you can download. It's open source. It's available on just about every operating system you want. In my personal opinion, it's got a terrible interface. I actually will take iDraw over Inkscape any day, but it's free. It fits some people perfectly. Myself, again, not a huge fan, but I can see how people love it. If you want to work on a desktop instead of your iPad or on a Mac, you should definitely check it out. It's a great place to go. But anyways, there's this site called 2dgameartforprogrammers.blogspot.ca, and they have a series of wonderful tutorials basically on getting started with vector graphics. It's step by step. It is all Inkscape specific, so the instructions follow Inkscape. What I'm going to do is I'm going to implement one of his simple tutorials in iDraw, so you can see the iDraw experience versus the Inkscape one. Hopefully at the end you'll decide if this is the kind of program for you. This is actually the one we're going to follow. It's on making a simple treasure chest, but the concepts you use here are pretty much the same regardless of the sophistication of what you're working on. So let's jump right into iDraw. iDraw over here, let's just find the icon and load it up. One of the things I like about iDraw right away is it actually has the ability to work in both portrait and landscape. I've locked it in landscape right now just so that I can capture it, but I do like the ability to work in both. Increasingly, more and more art programs are requiring you to run in landscape, and I actually like holding and drawing in portrait, so that's a nice feature. Alright, as you can see, I've actually already implemented. There's the end result of the tutorial we're about to do. Let me fire on back. First off, this is your management screen. The nice thing here is you can actually lump things together, organize things nicely. So if I take these two jets I was working on, and I can just drag one on top of the other and create a folder for jets. It's got a nice clean interface. This is also where you do your exporting. So let's say I want this jet out. I select, I'll go here, select the export arrow, pick the way I want it to go, and off I go. We'll touch on that a little bit later on, possibly in a different tutorial. But anyways, let's go back to the main. Let me try to, oh yeah, click again. So let's click a plus and start a new drawing here. You got a number of canvases you can work from. If you want a background, it's completely optional. It's not actually part of your scene. You can choose to export it with it or without. So this is more a matter of if you want to work this way or not. Let's just start with a blank for now. And open it up. So here is your basic interface. Across the top, you can see rulers. Those are completely optional. Same way as you can turn on or turn off a grid. I personally actually like working with a grid, especially for a tutorial like the one we're about to do. So let's go into the settings here. And you look over, there's grids and rulers. Let's kick in there. So again, I can turn the rulers off and on. I actually don't need them, so I'll turn it off. And then I'm going to turn the grid on, like so. You can see it's 12 by 12 as the grid space. You can make it more detailed, less detailed, however you wish to do. And the key one I'm going to play with, at least to start here, is snap to grid. Enable that. Grid snapping is it's very handy. If you've done any CAD work or 3D work before, you're probably familiar with it. But basically, it makes my drawings automatically snap and align with the grid. So you got very precise control over what you do. So for example, if I'm going to create this rectangle, it automatically follows, as I move, the grid lines. So you can see it sort of snapping as it goes. That's grid snapping. And again, for precision work like this, that is very, very handy. So down your left-hand side, there's your tool palette. So reality is you'll only actually use a very small handful of those tools. Actually, I guess you'll use a fair bit of them. The top couple, there's two different selection modes. One is for editing, one is for working with objects as a whole. Then the next one is you've got your pen. Pen's pretty powerful. I'm not entirely certain we're going to be using it here that much. I'll play with it later on just so you see what it's for. The next one is your text tool. There's actually some very sophisticated text functionality built into iDraw. We may touch on that after I finish the 2D Gamer Art tutorial. Next one is your freehand drawing and your pencil. These are actually somewhat well implemented and unique to iDraw. This is an area where Inkscape isn't quite as good, in my opinion. They allow you to do calligraphy style freehand vector work. So, like that. Now, the nice thing with this is you've got control points you can actually use to edit your curve after the fact, and your splines have control handles for manipulating curves. So it's nice for adding finishing details and the like. The pencil, however, is more for just pretty much rough sketches, freehand design, that kind of stuff. It's not really great for vector. You won't use it all that much. So let me just, again, we'll select it all, hit the X to get rid of it. Excuse me. Then you have your eraser, your line, your arcs, then your basic shaped, filled or unfilled. We're going to use those a lot. So we'll hop into that in a bit. At the bottom, you've got your transforms, and in between, you've got polygon, background, image settings, that kind of stuff. And then this is your shape library, which is really handy. We'll touch on it later. Again, not a key part of doing the tutorial. So let's just jump right into the tutorial. I'll flip back and forth so you can see what I'm doing. You'll see the first thing it's calling us to do is create a brown rectangle for the basis of our treasure chest. Let's go ahead and do that. We'll select the rectangle tool on the left-hand side. And then about the center, I'm going to do, say, from here, and then 4 grids down. And let's see, is that 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And we'll go about there. Okay, so there's your base rectangle. You'll notice right now we're just dealing with a solid, unfilled line. Let's go ahead and fill that. We want this to be solid brown as the base of our chest. So what we do is we tap that guy, bottom left, and that brings up your color options. And all we want to do is set it to a bit of a brown, like so. And just key the settings until you have about something roughly emulating wood. Now the key is, see the bottom one says alpha. That's your transparency. We actually want to be 100% transparent. Oh, sorry, 100% opaque. So as you can see, edited, there is our base shape. Now, something you can play with is the outline contour. So if you hit the eye over here, the informational icon, you can come up and you can set a number of settings about how this particular thing is going to be drawn. For example, we can change the stroke, which is the outline. We can change the thickness of it. You can change the style of it. So let's say we want to do a bit of like a freehand brush drawn look. We could use that guy instead. Or much more extreme. Actually, let's go back to what we started with though. So you got a fair bit of control of how your brush looks. You can do dash line, arrows, lines, that kind of stuff. So your key is your fill and your stroke. Your stroke is the outline around the outside edge, and sometimes you're not going to want one at all. And then your fill is the color that goes inside. Sometimes you're not going to have a color inside. Now, let's go make our stroke slightly smaller again. We'll go with the default of 2. Okay, so there's the outside base of the thing. Now, if we look back at the tutorial, it wants us to create 3 gold bars, basically to do the metal framing around our treasure chest. Simple enough. We just grab a rectangle guy and draw, again using snapping, over top. Now, one of the things you want to know here is you want to change the color after you do the drawing. If you do the color change before, at least in iDraw, it actually changes the color of the most recently active tool. So draw first, then tweak the color. So now let's go ahead, switch that, and let's get a bit of a gold. Apparently, Unity now supports Oculus Rift. So, I said that's not even news. Alright, so that's about right-ish. Go ahead and draw that. and then tap anywhere for it to be complete. So you can see around the outside edge. My scale is a little off. I think I want to make that guy a little bit bigger. What we can do is come into the edit mode. You look at the bottom, you've got these three things that popped up. We're going to touch on them a bit later, but right now we want to be in selection mode, which is the one we're in. And then we're just going to draw a rectangle around the two dots that make up the one side of our, or the 2 points that make up the one side of our rectangle. And then hover over one of the 2 points once selected and just drag it over a bit. And we're making it wider like so. Another key thing here that's very important is draw order. So you're basically, with vectors, you're layering shapes on top of other shapes. Now, one will obviously obscure the other, and you have to decide which is going to do what. In this case, we want the gold bars to make sure that they're drawn over the underlying shape, which is actually what's happening. So if I look, there is our base shape. And if I go over here to the pair of squares there, you can see the order slider here. This is very key. This is like in game programming, your Z buffer, basically. So this is the depth that each thing resides on. So if I move this, say, all the way to the front, see how it obscures our gold bars. Let's move it 3/4. Actually, move it all the way then, because nothing's going to go behind that guy. So that's very key. The depth that something's drawn at determines what draws over top of another thing. Especially works for opacity as well, for color blending and such. So now that we've got our one bar, let's go ahead and clone it. You can see this paperclip up the top. Hit the paperclip, and then just do a copy, and then paste in place. All right, and then tap off. Now we've actually pasted one over top of the other one. Just grab on it, drag it across the other side. There. Snapping makes it very easy to fit it in. Now finally, let's make one more, 3/4 height, and draw it across like so. So there's the basis of our chest getting started. Let's see what the next step is. All right, now we want to make some feet. Feet basically start by making a slightly rounded triangle. And I'll follow their way of doing things. They did it by taking a square and lopping one side off. Let's do the same thing. So the bottom left-hand corner here. Oh, by the way, you do pinch to zoom and then 2 fingers to pan. So we'll go ahead and draw a square. And we'll make it slightly over, like so. Okay, now what we want to do is go into edit mode, select the top left corner, like so, and then we'll hit the X to delete it. Now we have a triangle. Now what we want to do is curve our triangle a bit. And this part's a little tricky. You see at the bottom left there, we got our tools. So we've got the far left one is to go into select mode. The next one is to go into select more mode. That is if you want to make it grow your selection. The last one there is to change and edit to curves. And let's do that. So what we want to do is instead of having this one top corner being, was that a 45-degree corner, we want to curve it. So we just pick it and then follow along the path. So now that is a curved point. Now the key thing is if we touch it again, it'll kick it back to being a corner. So let's go back into being a curve, like so, and then go back into edit mode like this. So now we can modify that. There's the handles here that control how the curve is applied. Snapping is coming into effect. It's normally much smoother than this, but as you can see, you can control the exact angle of your corner pretty easily. Now the reality is what we want to do here is a completely straight edge and then the curve on the outside edge. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the one control angle and follow the edge like this. We want to take the second handle and come out this way to make around it. So this one, back straight. And getting a little long with this guy. Let's shrink him in. And back. Oh. You stay still, you little bugger. Why are you not cooperating? There. Ish. And we can do the bottom. And again, we can control the amount of curve we've got there. Like so. So now we have our rounded foot at the one bottom. So the key thing to learn there is, again, the one toggles between a sharp corner and a bendy corner, and then the other one puts you back in edit mode. So now let's select our overall shape. Zoom out a bit here. And we want to take our foot again. Okay, let's select our foot, copy it, we'll paste it. Now the key thing is, let's go over here to the ruler icon, which I'm not really entirely sure what that represents, and click this icon here, which causes a mirror. In case you didn't see that, it's the one right above the lock. That mirrors along the one axis, while the one to its other side mirrors along the other axis. So we just flipped a copy of what we just did, and now let's drag that down to the bottom corner. Like, let's see, I want 2 bars and 2 bars. Oh, as you saw, it'll actually do snapping lines to the other things on the screen. Very handy. Okay, so there's our feet. The next step is little circles inside the feet. Again, this is one of those areas where snapping can actually be kind of annoying. When you want to position something in the corner, snapping can get in your way. So you might want to flip over here, turn it off for a second. So now, circle tool, create your circle, click on the color select, select black, done. Let's zoom in a bit, position that a little bit better, up there, and then we'll do a copy, zoom out, do a paste. That's annoying. All right, that grid around the outside, each of those selectors allows you to do scaling on the fly. Unfortunately, to move, you also have to be right in the middle. So I have to zoom in a great deal in order to get nice selectors. So, all right, there, zoomed in, click it in the middle, drag it over. And then as you see, the pop-up shows me that I'm lined up with my other circle on the other side. There you go. All right, next step is, let's see, wood graining. This is where your ordering comes in very important, because you want to make sure that this is drawn on top of the underlying chest pieces, but below the gold band. So let's go ahead and we'll make one of these things. You're just basically adding a small differential to the color to give an effect of wood graining. So there's one in. Obviously, you won't want to change the color. Let me show you one way we can do it. We'll pick the color, and then what we're going to do is we're going to bring up the clone tool. So a little eyedropper guy. Click it, and then drag it over the existing wood color. So now we're matched to the color. And we'll go in and we'll just increase the brightness slightly, I guess. We'll add a little bit of transparency, like so. Now, let me see. Yeah, okay. So in the tutorial, they have no lines. So we're going to follow the tutorial exactly. So on our shape, again, okay, so select mode there. We go over to the information, and for stroke, we could either set it to 0 or we can kick into effects and turn off the check marks beside stroke. So now there's no black lines surrounding our new engraved shape. But if you look over here, that is not the look you want, because your shape is being drawn over the lines of the underlying shape. So what you want is this guy drawing over top of this guy. And again, that is done by either moving this guy back in the order or this guy up in the order. Let's move the band forward in the order. Oh wait, no, because we want the middle band to be on top of it. So let's move this guy back. So just click it, bring up to the double squares here, and slide the ordering back until it pops below. There you go. Oops, I just moved something. Let's undo that. Now zoom out. So now let's repeat that same process with slightly down. So And pick the color cloning, on the earlier version. Go into the info, turn off stroke so there's no line drawn. Go into the double square thingies here, push it further to the back. There you go. Now the next part, I believe, is us making a lock. Yep, so it starts with, and here's another key part about working with vectors. A lot of it's about building compound shapes. And we're about to make our first compound. So far we've used very simple primitives, but this time we're actually going to create a shape out of multiple shapes. So let's start by making a rectangle, or like so. That's centered. Okay. And we want it to be at the very front. And we want it to be the same color as our brass. Color picker, bring it over, boom, applied. All right, so now what we want to do, as you can see from the tutorial over here, is they've created this, there's this rounded edge around the top of the lock. That's simply made, just come in here and do a rounded square. Down here, the radius determines how rounded the corners are. And we'll just go about making one here. So say like that. And we'll just select it and move it down a bit. So it's centered on the lock. Now that's obviously not the shape we want, but the overall shape is what we want. So what we want to do is we pick our underlying square. And remember what I said about multi-select? Let's go into select mode, grab the other guy, the guy in the middle there, to say we want to select more. I click the second shape. So boom, now we've got a compound shape. We go up to this double square icon in the top right, go into combine. And if you've used 3D graphics at all, any of the Boolean tools, this is the same functionality. You can add shapes together, subtract them. You can subtract them and only take the parts that are overlapped. You can do the exact opposite, which is an exclude, or you can divide, which kind of just takes everything and turns it into its own little shape. What we want to do here is a union. I hit union, and then boom, we just turned our simple shape into a compound shape. So that's how you make slightly more complex shapes with this tool. Or, of course, and something I haven't touched on, that's what you can do with the pen tool. I'll try to come back to that in a little bit. So let's just finish this tutorial up. Last thing we want to do is put a lock in. Centered, just draw a circle, like yo. We want it black. I don't think I'm centered anymore. Let's, oops. Undo. Let's go and there. Center. So there's our lock. Oops. Undo. Keep moving things when I'm doing my pinch to zoom. Alright. So there's your basics of your chest. Now the final step here, and this is actually kind of neat, this is shading. And shading is where you're going to start adding some texture on top. So these things around the outside, this gold band is supposed to be metal, and it's supposed to be reflecting a bit, and obviously it isn't. So let's add a little bit of like a fake light reflection, which is exactly what that tutorial does. Now let's go this side, and we'll add one. All you do is basically create simple shapes over top of your existing shape. So let's go and make a rectangle here. All right, first thing we want to do, because we're just trying to add a little color highlight here. We'll turn off stroke, snow lines, and then just to start, we'll go in again. We'll do a clone, which makes it a little hard to see. Now, actually, well, it's selected. It's easier to go here. So now what we're going to use is a gradient fill. You'll use gradient fills all the time. A gradient is basically you give it two colors. It interpolates between the two. So what we want to do is go from light to our actual color. And here's the different gradient options. You've got radial gradients, which is a circular gradient. A linear gradient, which goes from, well, as you can see, it's vertical bands, which can be changed. And then angular gradient, it doesn't really have a lot of use as far as I can tell, but it's a 360 rotate out from the center. Let's go back to linear. And what we want to do, instead of going left to right, we want to go top to bottom. So as if the sun was coming down on the top of the chest. That's just a matter of rotating it 90 degrees. As you can see, now it's going light at the top, darkest at the bottom. Now we want to change what the two colors on our gradient are. That means left-hand side, in the number, you just click it, And then we ultimately want a gradient to our end color, like so. And then let's go back in, and then we click inside of our first color, and we want it to be white-ish, not too extreme. So let's bring up saturation a bit here, like so. And put transparency down a bit on our overall, and done. So now, you see, a bit of a sun glare on our shape. Let's take our shape, and we'll copy, paste, and once again, move. I do wish there were some symmetry tools. A lot of work is going to be identical on two sides, and unfortunately there's nothing to make your life easy in that regard. But it's a relatively small gripe. There you go. There is a treasure chest made in vector graphics. Not the greatest work you'll ever see, but it is somewhat effective, and it does show you the general process. And then again, when you zoom that out and you're using it as a sprite, it doesn't look too bad. So that's a very simple version of how vector graphics work and what iDraw brings to the table. Now let's take a look at some of the stuff that's actually that we didn't use in the tutorial that iDraw does. One of the things that we do is there's layers, and we never used layers before, so you can layer stuff on top of other stuff. So I could, all right, so the second layer is active, and I could go and draw on layer 2. You can toggle its visibility, easy enough. You can change, let's see, come on, how do I do that? Oop, I don't want to rename it. Each of the aspects that go into making it up can individually be toggled on and off. Basically a history. And you can, and I'm not figuring out how, okay. You can do effects between layers. And let's delete. Okay, not the greatest part of the demonstration. We'll skip over that for now. But anyways, you can do layers across your different shapes and such. You can get rid of them. Let's bring that back up and get rid of that guy completely. As you saw, it's a standard. Oops. See, I'm using a stylus, and this is actually one of those things that doesn't play well with the stylus. All right, hell, I'll just use it over here to delete it. All right, gone. Oops, undo. So that's the layer interface. Swipe it back to you. Why are you not working? All right, hit the X to get rid of it. So there's layering support. We go into settings. You saw snapping. You can move your interface around. You can change the colors you've got. You can go to outline mode, which basically works in just shapes and can be incredibly handy sometimes. You've got control over pretty much all aspects of your canvas that you're working on. You do a resize and shrink. Let me just give it a, oops, I'm not in select mode. I do that a lot in this program. Now, there, select my whole thing. You can group, go back to arrange, group, turns all those things into, basically now it's treated as one item. When you get sick of doing that, you can ungroup it, split it back to normal. Since everything here is shapes, you can actually erase through them, and that is effectively creating two sets of shapes. Very handy. You can, let's see, undo that, because I do not actually want that. Trying to think what else. Nothing much really to show there. You can scale and change, mirror, and flip. We saw this earlier. You can lock so that something is not editable or selectable anymore. Over here, this is where you changed your various settings. We didn't see the other options, but you can also set drop shadowing and such on. Okay, why is it not? There you go. So you can see drop shit. I hate that it doesn't kick into select mode after a tool. So it's always in the mode of the previous tool you used. So as you can see here, it's kind of in the way, but you can do drop shadow, inner shadow, glow, and glow. Set the colors of them however you'd like, and then you see the end result there. So you got a fair bit of control over how things are shaded and look. Again, you can come in here, pre-made styles, saved and cached styles, and there's your editing options earlier for, you can turn the shadowing on and off. You can change the stroke, the way the stroke is drawn, which we saw earlier, etc. So basically you're layering all of these things together to make more complex shapes. One step further is, here's a folder I put together earlier. This is a very ugly, oh, why are you in there? Alright, let's just kill that guy. It's a very ugly, simple character sprite. And let's go ahead and we'll just load the body up. And this is your basis of your body. And this is one possible way that you could put together a more complex character out of different pieces. In one of the areas where iDraw can actually kind of shine is over here you look, we see the shape library. And this allows you to actually save vectors that you've created as shapes. So I've created a shape library called night. And this is the different pieces and components that go into making up a knight. As you see, the body's already in there. So let's see, I want the arm. I want the head. Alright, I want a slightly smaller version of the head. I want the other arm. Out of the way. Get out of the way. Scale down. And then obviously, once again, draw order is important. So since this is at the back of our sprite, I want it to be drawn at the very back, like so. And you can very quickly put together compound objects out of shapes that you've done. Pretty powerful, especially if you're working on game sprites when you're going to reuse body parts and pieces. Obviously, you might want to put a little bit more effort into it than I did on this guy, but it does show you how the library can be of use to you. Another key, and I haven't really touched on here, let's delete that, is again this pen. The pen is your freeform shape drawing tool. So mostly actually completely in the last one, I started with rectangles and circles. You can, however, use the pen to do freehand things. And then once again, you can go back into select mode over here and corner on the fly, like so. Oops, went in the wrong direction on that one. Create shapes there, or you go back into your pen again, and you can plus or minus out points. So if I want to add another point over here, I can do so. Let's see, was I selected? There, and pin, plus, there, added it. Now one thing you might notice, and this becomes very obvious if I select mode and make the stroke quite clear. It's not closed. That's because you're not really dealing with shapes here. You're dealing with paths. And until a path is closed, it's not a shape. This is actually fairly simple to deal with. You just go again back into this trusty guy and into the path menu. And here, you just pick close path. Boom. And now your path is a shape. You can also combine paths together, same kind of stuff. So open curved lines are paths, closed are shapes. This is where you go into open and close them. And again, you can use eraser to make compounds. There is edit mode for on the grand level, and there's an edit mode for on the component level. That is basically iDraw. You can obviously you need to make an artist. You don't need to be an artist to get the most out of this. It is about layering together basic things to make more complex things. But the basics are the basics, and once you've got them, it's really just a matter of learning from there. The nice thing with vector graphics, I can zoom in as far as I want. I can zoom out as far as I want, and the detail level. The detail level stays the same. That is hands down the biggest strength of vector graphics. There are weaknesses. They're more expensive to render. I mean, computationally, GPU-wise, they ultimately normally are turned into sprites when you're done. So then they have all the weaknesses of sprites anyways, but it allows you your source to be in whatever resolution you want, and then you can export 1080p assets if you have to, 320 assets if you have to, or 16 by 16 pixel assets if you have to. So when your source is in vector, it's infinitely flexible for resolution, which is very handy. Speaking of exporting, kick back to our main menu, close out our library. Let's go to the chest actually the one I made earlier. Let's say I want to export this out to the world at large. That is done from the screen we just left, so I'm not going to save, even though I didn't change anything. Just click the box with an up arrow. Brings up all your options. Generally, with working with Codea, I've been going straight to Dropbox, which I'll actually go ahead and do that again today, but you can also export it to your photo gallery, to whatever. But let's go ahead and do a save to Dropbox. And it's nice to note, you see save to Dropbox is a direct option, as well as send to app, which you can then send to Dropbox with. So it saves you one step, and it will automatically save where you previously saved, so you don't have to navigate through Dropbox to figure out where you want to put things. Let's go ahead and do a save to Dropbox. Pick the documents we want, and then click share. And here is where iDraw really shines. You can now export in a variety of formats. PDF can be brought into Codea as a vector graphics format, so that's what I used last time. SVG, it's an older web standard, quite common as well. PSD is the Photoshop format, and then PNG and JPEG, you obviously know as standard raster formats. iDraw itself has its own format. You can now export this to the desktop version, and the desktop version here, they read each other's file formats perfectly. You'll actually find the Mac version is almost identical to what we just saw here. Obviously, it's controlled by the mouse. There's a couple things that use modifier keys, like sub-selections, that kind of thing. But otherwise, they're virtually identical. The only other thing that you might want to notice here is the include background. By checking that, unchecking that, you get just your shape. So if you're trying to export game assets, what's in the background? Like I said earlier, very first when we started, the background you pick doesn't really matter. It doesn't have to be saved as part of the document. So if you do uncheck that, you're just getting the shapes you created. Or if you're not exporting to a vector format, the background isn't rendered as part of the output. Of course, it can be. And one thing we didn't touch on earlier, and let me just cancel out of here, go into a shape. You do actually have options. Click over here on the icon. You can bring in photos like so. And you can also set the background after the fact. Like so. Change the image. Let's go ahead and pick something meaningless. And then boom, there's your background. So there are basic 2D raster things here. You can bring in a background and have it saved as part of the output. You can also skew and modify the shapes using control handles. You have rotate and scale options here. And then one last thing to cover on our very messy screen. Let me just go back. Don't save. Go to an empty one. Text tools. Not typically of all that much use for games, but for just general work, this is a nice, easy, simple text layout tool to use. Let's go in, drop your text, pick your font, type your text. Pick your font size. And lay it out. Very simple, easy text. You can also do text along a curve, lay it out. You can do bend text, warp text. Now all your standard modifiers work. Oops, wrong one. So I can rotate the text if it's selected, and so on and so forth. So if you do need to do some text placement manipulation, this is a good tool to do it in. At the same time, let's see. Oops, my bad. All right, never mind. I'll get out of there. Yeah, so text, again, it's not something that's generally that useful to you, but if you need to throw together a logo or put text as part of a texture or something like that, it does have tools built in. They work relatively well. That's it. So basically, that is iDraw in a nutshell. It's a handy little program, easily worth $10. Obviously, it's stripped down in power from Illustrator and probably even Flash. I personally find it that much more accessible than Inkscape. Try out Inkscape. If you like the look of vector graphics like we just covered today, Inkscape nails it. And if you want a great resource for looking at that stuff, again, this website, 2D game art for 2D art for programmers.blogspot.ca, perfect place to get started. There are hundreds of tutorials of varying complexity. They really do show you the nuances of creating some pretty solid art pretty quickly. So consider vector graphics for your game. If you are going down that road, iDraw is definitely a program worth checking out. Thank you very much.